I must confess that I'm looking nerd fresh. Minty clean like Chris. Sidewalks light up when I step. Batman symbol on my chest. Bruce Wayne fly fresh. So fresh. I'm fresh. Nerd fresh.
On February 22nd, 1993, the pilot episode of Babylon 5 premiered, and the world was introduced to one of the best science fiction shows to come out of the 90s. Humans and aliens working together in order to promote peace. But before I get too far ahead of myself, this is Street Nerdz, and I am your host, the only person to be kicked out of Vault 101 for lack of bathing, Stretch. At number 9, the aliens are diverse within their own species. I could literally spend 4 hours going into all the different alien races that are shown on Babylon 5. But rather than bore you with all of that, or perhaps just save it for another entry of Street Nerdz, I'm going to go ahead and just hit on a couple of the major species. The first being the Narn. The Narn representative to Babylon 5 was Jakar. One of the most fascinating characters, and his development transcends any stereotypical behavior you could have assigned to his species. Now, he is not the only Narn you see throughout the show, and each one has their own personalities. Some are duplicitous, while others noble and honor-bound. This stands true for the Membari as well. The other major race other than humans in the show, they are always depicted as being truthful, altruistic, and honor-bound. Yet again, among their own species, there are those who work against what is considered the greater good. And just in case you were wondering, humans are humans. Some are good, some are bad, and some are just trying to survive in an indifferent universe. This is by no means the full representation of the species depicted in the show. And each of those species have characters as wide and diverse as some of the shows we even have today. Just as you have no idea what a human might do by looking at them, the same could be said by any of the species on Babylon 5. Number 8. The ships and stations obey the laws of physics. So this might be a little bit of a nerd nitpick, but Star Trek has a physics problem in that nothing obeys it properly. Okay, so they have evolved to the point where they don't need to worry about pesky things like physics laws, and their technology does allow them to do incredible things, granted. But it is still very cool, as a nerd growing up, to see a show take the time and care to present what it must be like to live, work, and operate in space when you have to obey the laws of physics. From ships that move in zero-G by using thrusters to start and stop, and just coasting through the silence of night, to the station itself having to be put on an axial rotation in order to generate an artificial gravity, and even making note that the plants on the station are specifically grown for oxygen, as well as aesthetics, emphasizes the real sense of what it must be like to be all alone in the night. Also, this serves to show just how advanced other species are when they showcase the ability to control and manipulate gravity, showing that humans are not the toughest guys on the block simply because we have a cool space station spinning next to a planet. And watching the space battles where ships have to take into account gravity turn radiuses and even G-forces adds extra tension to some of those laser-fueled fight scenes. A lot of these ideas actually served as plot devices and not just background cool things to see in a sci-fi show. Number 7. The humans are real and relatable. In a lot of sci-fi shows, human beings tend to fall into two categories of good or evil. This still persists today, as it is an easy way to show who your heroes are and who your villains are, simply by making them one-dimensional caricatures depicting one of these two ideas. Babylon 5 tended to make some of their villains truly sympathetic, while some of their heroes were a little abrasive and difficult to take sometimes. And this just went on to show the true nature of humanity. We do not easily fall into one category or another. A hero to some may very well be a villain to others, and this was a subject that was explored throughout all 5 seasons of Babylon 5. There is a sense that humanity is moving towards a brighter and better future, but the means of getting there differ greatly depending on who you ask and who you follow. I really don't want to give too much away in the hopes that this list will inspire you to check out Babylon 5, but just know that you will love some of the characters and even find yourself absolutely loving to hate others. Number 6. The future still has religion. Religion and faith is one of the largest aspects of human history, from the early gods of nature and totemic worship to the more organized Greek, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian gods to the monotheistic Abrahamic religions we have today. It seems that faith and spiritual understanding follows us throughout the past, so it would only stand to reason that it would follow us into the future as well. Once again, the show takes a great care in depicting humanity has not left its spiritual or religious aspects to the wayside. And not just to show bias to the humans, other races have different religions within their own species. Something else that is unique to the show. It is said that the Narn have 3 major religions that they practice amongst its people, and the Centauri are known to have gods by the bushel if Mulari is to be believed. One episode even shows each of the dominant religions of all the different species, and I won't dare give away the ending here, but how human religion is depicted is thought-provoking. Number 5. The future still has problems. This entry might not be fair, as all future has to have problems in order to have stories that are interesting. So I should say the future still has a lot of the problems we face in the present. The idea of xenophobia, the poor, corruption within the government are all explored in the show. It is a characteristic shared in humans as well as other races in the galaxy. At some point you will be amazed we even are able to work together at all, and sometimes that makes it all the better when you see them come together. But again, showing the realistic fact that while we might have progressed technologically, it'll be a long time before we as a people solve all of the problems for everyone, and just the recognition of that can be some of the first steps in correcting it. Number 4. There is one story that it is telling over 5 years. This might not seem such a novel notion now, but back in the 90s, TV shows tended to be more episodic. Even Star Trek didn't introduce the idea of a coherent storyline until Deep Space Nine. Babylon 5 from the get-go had one story to tell, and it was going to tell it over 5 years. Things that are set up in the first episode of the first season play out and gain resolution in the 4th and 5th seasons. And by the end of the show, you feel like you have gone on a true journey with everyone present. This show was ahead of its time and one of the first to do what all shows are doing now in telling a complete story. Number 3. It isn't about good guys against bad guys. Babylon 5 is more of an exercise in philosophy. It depicts various different ideologies, and it is left to the viewer as to who is right and who is wrong. The characters on the show definitely work towards a resolution, but it can be debated by those who watch it which idea was quote-unquote correct. The story builds to a great climax and leaves the viewer realizing they hadn't watched a battle of good versus evil, but of shifting galactic ideals. There is a true epicness to the story where the stakes are on a galactic level. All of the different races banding together in order to decide the fate of every living thing in the galaxy, for lack of a better word, is awe-inspiring. Number 2. The characters grow with the story. This one to me is the most important aspect of any TV show or movie. The journey you take with the characters is only as good as the growth and the journey the characters themselves take. In Babylon 5, we start off with a cast and crew of characters that we learn to love or hate and become interested in because we see them change throughout the show itself. One character in particular does a complete 180 as far as personal beliefs and types of interactions he has with other characters. Some characters find their footings and become the great people we knew they were always going to be, while others stumble and lose their way. Regardless of what changes happen, it is clear that each character had a story and a progression to go through, and you, the watcher, get to go through it with them through the entire series. In other shows, characters tend to be static, and events happen around them, and it is because of who they are that they are able to deal with whatever happens. However, in Babylon 5, the events that are happening around the characters help to shape the characters just as they would in real life. And finally, at number 1, we have J. Michael Straczynski. Chances are, if you are a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, you watched something that this man wrote. He wrote episodes of He-Man, She-Ra, Captain Power, and The Real Ghostbusters, as well as the 1980s Twilight Zone, as well as several other prominent shows of the 80s and 90s. Seriously, check out his IMDb page, it's pretty impressive. And while you're there, you'll also see that he has a story credit for the first Thor movie. The reason for this is that he wrote one of the best Thor comic books to come out of the early 2000s. Check it out, it's really good. You can see a lot of these sci-fi elements as well as epic adventureness in Babylon 5 itself, and you can see that he brought all of these elements from these other shows to make Babylon 5 one of the best shows to come out of the 90s. Well, that's my list. If you've seen Babylon 5, let me know if I've left anything out in the comments below. If you haven't seen it, I hope it's inspired you to check it out. This has been Street Nerdz. Don't forget to hit subscribe, that bell notification, check out our Facebook, and as always, I am Stretch, and if you loved it, liked it, or hate it, the only reason you have an opinion is because you watched it, and for that, I thank you.
I'm fresh, nerd fresh, so fresh, no matter how I dress. It's me I must impress, so then I must confess that I'm looking nerd fresh.